Good morning. So I'm here with Gilles Babinet, who's one of France's best-known technology entrepreneurs, and he's also a digital champion for the European Commission. Gilles, we're going to talk about humans versus machines. Going digital has lots of advantages. It allows us to do many things that we were not able to do before, but it also now threatens to eliminate many people's jobs. How big of a concern is this, and what should we be doing as a society to prepare?
Thank you. I'm extremely pleased to be here to talk about these topics and with this wonderful audience. So I think it's one of the most challenging questions. You know, we don't even know whether it's going to create job or simply decrease the number of jobs. There are a lot of people afraid of the fact that the technology can remove jobs, and actually it's been the case in several domains. But I think that overall we need to understand the dynamics behind that and to be able to have the right policies. I think one of the things which is becoming quite obvious for government in general is that it's certainly a technological revolution, but first and foremost, it's a human capital revolution. And we have more sophisticated technologies. We have a number of skills that are increasing for making this technology work. And therefore, we need to pay attention much more than we did in the second revolution to the quality of human capital. And I think that on the long run, the countries, the region that's going to succeed will be the one that will be able to massify the quality of human capital. And it's interesting because we don't know it, but if you take the three different regions, China, Europe, and the US, where you have the most Nobel Prize, where you have the most PhDs is by far Europe. You know, and we don't use it well because we don't have synchronized market, because we don't have I would say, regional strategies. It's too much of the countries to decide which skills they want to create. And should we be able to synchronize those markets, we would certainly create a lot of growth and a lot of jobs.
Do you think governments are doing enough to prepare people for this change?
I think what is interesting is that it's not an incremental revolution, it's a disruptive revolution. And what is great with the disruptive revolution is you don't need to think as you did before. You need to change completely the way the mindset of societies are organized. And obviously, one of the key aspects is bringing women in. You know, and I would say that in the digital space, we've been very bad at it so far. You know, if you go to a coding school, you would find most probably 15% of these people being women, and it's a shame because one thing which is obvious is that the most successful companies, especially when you think about creativity, about disruptive innovation, are the diverse companies, meaning companies with women, with ethnical minorities and so on. And it's not because I like it, it's because it's proven, you know, it's a fact. So I think it's also, I would say, either at a corporate level or I would say at a nation level, a key aspect that we can't wait. We need to move this on very quickly because it's good for everyone and because we won't be able to keep acting as we did in the past in the second revolution.
Do you think that there will be some jobs that humans will be better at than technology?
I think everything where you can put the word art of the table, for instance, you'll still have a lot of people. And I think what is for sure is that we have different talent at the machines, and we'll keep having it. I've been talking with key stars in the AI like Yann Lequin, and these people have no concern about the fact that machine won't become conscious soon. You know, so what we need is to be able to weather the relationship in between AI and people. and it's by linking those two together that we will increase the productivity. We have to know that so far we don't see much productivity out of this new revolution at a macroeconomic scale. We see it when we talk about microeconomic scale, like Google, Facebook, and so on. And we need probably to have more general policies so that we can bring this technology into the traditional business before we can see productivity. And it's certainly by being able to make a link in between the technology and the basic business, the plumber, all these traditional businesses that we're going to be able to move this on.
What would you advise the people in the room to do to prepare for this change?
I'll say something which might sound like a little bit provocative, but something you have to try is to do like a little bit of coding. It sounds completely silly, but I did some coding when I was 14. And I would say I was a very bad coder. I did maybe 3-4 years of coding, but it completely changed my prospects, my vision of the world. Because you can decompose tasks, you can understand it very differently, and it helped me a lot when I became an entrepreneur. So the first thing that you will have is you will better understand the surrounding world, how things work. You have technology everywhere. You don't know how it works. By doing like maybe 1 week of coding, not more, you will see differently. And secondly, you will think differently. You will completely think differently in a manner that is certainly more appropriate to the world that's coming than to the previous one.
Thank you. I know that you need to run off, but we're very happy that you were able to join us this morning. Can I have a nice round of applause for Gilles?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to now ask our panelists to come up on stage. We have Paul Dougherty from Accenture, Eva Lara, the CEO of George Jensen, and Tim Brown, CEO of IDEO. So we're going to continue our discussion about humans and machines. We started by talking about the concerns of people losing their jobs, but now we're going to turn to the positive, a more positive side of all of this, how machines and humans can work side by side. So, there are some great examples of this. There's a company in Lisbon called On Babel that is pairing machine learning, augmenting machine learning with 50,000 translators from around the world to make the translation service for corporates better. There's a US research organization that is augmenting their machine learning with hundreds of thousands of gamers from around the world to help scientists better understand the brain. Eva Lara, tell us how George Jensen is pairing technology with old world craftsmanship.
So I'm the CEO of this company, and to tell you a little bit about the background, it's a design company who promotes Scandinavian design. It's been around for 113 years, and we have always honored craftsmanship. So what do you do then as a CEO? Because I love art and design, and I love technology. And I don't see that it shouldn't be able to work together. So what we've done is that we have, as a starting point, always started with the vision of the humans, the people, and the craftsmanship. That's always the starting point. And then we have added, where it makes sense, robotics or 3D printing. It has helped us when we design and we do concept and in the end products to be more radical in our innovation, in both using materials or when we do design collaborations with, for example, architects or others, we learn from them as well. Even though we are Scandinavian, we're based in Denmark, we worked always with international designers to kind of bring that different mindset into our world. And now technology is something we embrace as well.
Thank you. So let me turn to you now, Paul. You have written a book, or you're writing a book on this topic. Tell us how you believe AI can be paired with humans, and how business leaders can help in this transition.
Yeah, writing a book that's titled Human Plus Machine, Reimagining Work in the Age of AI. And the fundamental belief that I have and that we have is that artificial intelligence is the biggest disruption, we have the word disrupting here, the biggest disruption that we will see in the information age. It'll have the biggest impact on the way the world works and lives, and transforming the way the world works and lives, because it's fundamentally changing the relationship between us as people and the machines. And if you think about it today, there's a lot of people out there using their smartphones right now, and you think about just the way we interact with technology now, we think it's fantastic that we can use our thumbs to type in a little small supercomputer screen on a keyboard that was designed to slow the pace of human typing, because in the old days, the mechanical keys couldn't move fast enough. That's what we think is cool, and it's really made us slaves to technology. And our belief is that smarter technology with natural language processing and speech and vision, machine learning and everything that comes with it, it provides a powerful tool to people to be more effective. So we don't think about it as humans versus machines, we think about it as humans and machines, and how we can augment the work people do and make them more effective. There's this fear that we're creating superhuman robots that are going to take over the human race, and we really believe it's about making humans super in the use of technology instead. And the way what we've done is we've looked at, this sounds great, but what does it really look like? We've gone out and looked at drill operators in the oil industry and how their jobs are changing as machine learning and new technologies are being applied, and looked at assembly workers in manufacturing, and looked at loan originators and banks as artificial intelligence and new technologies introduced. And what we see is that there's the opportunity to make all those roles more effective, make the people more effective at what they do. And the economic research we've done around this shows that we believe we can increase the productivity of people up to 40% in these jobs, which is a massive change in the right categories of jobs. And so just the quick idea on how we believe this works is you need to stop thinking about humans versus machines, which is I think what Gilles was saying earlier. Don't think about the extremes of what a machine or a person does, but look at how we can augment in the middle. We call it the missing middle, because we don't think there's enough focus on the middle area where machines and people need to collaborate. And we think there's 6 categories of new jobs. I won't go through them all, but we've identified 6 categories of jobs that are enhanced and enriched, which we believe create phenomenal opportunity. One category of jobs, or one set of those jobs, is all around where people are needed to augment what machines do. A great example we're seeing in our business is we're hiring people and training people to be personality trainers for virtual agents and chatbots that our clients are deploying, because the chatbot that a bank may want to deploy will have a very different personality and behavioral style than an energy company or a different type of company. And that's a persistent, sustained, increasing job category that requires maybe a little bit of STEM, but also needs liberal arts and other types of disciplines to be effective. And then on the other side, you have the jobs where machines are helping people. We had a discussion before the panel on areas like generative design in the design and product design and manufacturing business, which is transforming the way that those disciplines are performed, making people more effective using new technology, new algorithms to enhance their productivity. So, just netting it out, it's easy to look at the jobs that are replaced. That's easy to do today. Look at the jobs that are eliminated. There certainly will be disruption and displacement. We need to deal seriously with the issues you and Gilles were talking about around retraining and policy initiatives for those people. But we believe, as you look at it, there's far more opportunity for leaders in business and government to look at how do we really prepare people for this new generation of jobs and opportunity that we believe will create more opportunity.
What do you think business leaders should be doing?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of probably 2 or 3 things. One is we really believe it's an era where business leaders need to take what we call a responsible view on how to apply technology, which is looking at how do you make the right decisions to benefit and advance people, because there's a lot of downsides that are well understood about bias and discrimination, and lots of downsides of applying technology the wrong way, and that's amplified by artificial intelligence. So how do we apply it responsibly and a responsible view of leadership in the era of AI is something we spend a lot of time with our clients on, and we have a very deep view on. A second thing is view people as not an expendable resource. that you can automate away, but view people as an investable resource, that you're preparing people proactively for the new jobs and new skills that they'll need to be effective. And then the third is focus on the retraining, because there will be people who are automated, whose jobs are automated, like with any technology. That's what technology is the history of automating and making things easier for people to use. There will be jobs eliminated. We believe that corporate leaders and government leaders have a higher obligation to really look at how we prepare and develop those skills in people.
Okay, thanks. Let me then turn now to Tim, who is a world-renowned expert on design. Tim, people have all seen those, movies that talk about robots going amok. There's concern about, if we allow artificial intelligence to start running things and literally make like life and death decisions in the case of autonomous cars. There's actually real serious efforts going on by global standards bodies to hardwire ethics into artificial intelligence. How do we make sure that this is done in a way that doesn't reinforce existing human biases, including gender bias?
There's a lot that needs redesigning in the way we do things, and we can start at the very top, I think, and ask questions about what's the purpose of business, for instance. Is the purpose of business to build a better machine, or is the purpose of business to serve people? I would argue that the purpose of business is to serve people in society. But that's not necessarily how we thought about business. And we start thinking about some of these challenges that we've got. If we imagine deploying AI through the lens of we're building businesses to serve people, you do different things than if you deploy AI through the lens of we're trying to make businesses better machines. One leads you to automation, I think one leads you to augmentation. I think the same is true of policy. When we think about is the role of policy to contribute to the way technology helps us build better societies, or is the role of policy some sort of reactive police procedure, right? And I think we've tended to think policy as a reactive policing thing in the past, but partly because we've had the chance to, right? Because technology hasn't been moving so fast so that policy can react, but that is not the case today, right? So policymakers have to be involved literally in the process of the way these technologies evolve themselves. They have to get in and literally we have to design policies and guidelines and governance at the same time as we're designing the applications for these technologies. And in both cases, in order for the results of those design activities to be appropriate and to serve the needs of society, the people that do them have to be made up of diverse and interdisciplinary teams. So we have to change the makeup of the way technology is being evolved. It needs a much more diverse set of people involved at the table. And it's, I don't think that's a particularly difficult challenge to overcome. We heard just from Gilles, that interdisciplinary teams, when it comes to developing new technology, are more effective. Diverse teams are more effective, and so there's a reason for us to go about it. I think the same is probably true of policy. I suspect policy making is not as diverse today as it could be. I know rather less about that, but I suspect we could take the same approach there.
But it's not just about gender, right? I
No.
mean, we probably don't want to hand over mission control for humanity to engineers or some harried programmer who's rushing to make a deadline. We probably need to bring in philosophers, ethicists, all kinds of people to help us figure this out. Now, there's no kind of mechanism for doing that today.
There are some that are beginning to emerge. So one interesting experiment that's been run for the last 4 or 5 years in the UK is that they have a design team in the Cabinet Office. The Cabinet Office is the sort of closest central government policy-making organization that works with departmental policymakers as they're putting their policy strategies together. So they literally have design teams. These are people that come from ethnographic backgrounds, from design backgrounds, from business backgrounds, who are working with civil servants and ministers to create these policies right at the very beginning. That's new. That's never happened in government before. So that's one interesting experiment. Another interesting experiment is back in San Francisco, where I live. The World Economic Forum has just created something called the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is a collaboration between governments, technologists, and technology businesses. Both Paul's company and my company are involved, looking at streams of these disruptive technologies, AI, drones, autonomous vehicles, et cetera, and looking at how the technologies and policy might evolve together, and building project teams around these who are working, people coming from different countries and different governments. So it'll be interesting to see. It's only just started, but it's a new experiment in how technology and policy might co-evolve.
So it's great that there's like international organizations like this World Economic Forum one that are getting involved. But what is interesting is when there's been experiments done by by MIT on asking people what, for example, what they think an autonomous car should do. You know, if a decision has to be made between, you know, killing the pedestrian or killing the people inside the car, what would people want the car to do? And the answers differ according to geography, because there is no like one global like set of human ethics that everyone agrees on, right? So we might find ourselves in a situation where a car manufacturer has to program the artificial intelligence of a car differently depending on which country that they're selling it in, which you know brings up a whole other set of interesting.
I mean, culture has always met technology in interesting ways, right? And this is the next generation of that, and we have to anticipate it. I mean, the important thing about the work that places like MIT are doing is beginning to anticipate those issues, and rather than wait until you know they're already a major problem. But we've always had to integrate culture and technology, and and governments will have to think about this stuff, and societies will have to think about it.
Yeah, just to add on to that, there's no right answer to some of those questions. You need to, but we believe that, you know, or I think what you need to do is you need to make sure that as leaders and as people, we're taking accountability for the right decisions. That's why when we think about responsible AI, we think about 5 things really. One is accountability, where for that problem you talked about, if you're designing an autonomous vehicle, you need to think about and have a framework and answer for how do you resolve that. You can't just leave it to a programmer to decide how it's going to work. So there's accountability for these decisions. It's just a new obligation or a continued obligation. There's transparency. There's certain algorithms. There's all this discussion in AI about black box algorithms and how will you know how decisions were made. There's a famous case in the US right now where sentencing guidelines for certain criminal, in a certain jurisdiction, sentencing guidelines for criminal sentences are being decided by an algorithm that's using black box AI. Well, that's probably not appropriate. That's something you should be able to explain. So you have an obligation to transparency for things that need to be explained. I think there's an obligation toward honesty. It's very easy, and there's examples of companies that have gamed AI and gamed technology to break laws, and that's not right. Just because you can design a self-driving car to monitor where there are police and not, and design it to speed, you shouldn't do that. You should follow the laws and regulations. Then finally, one of the most important things is fairness. Every data set, the underpinning of AI and this new technology is data. Every data set has bias in it. And we have obligations as businesses and leaders to make sure that we're ferreting out the discrimination, not using algorithms to perpetuate or enhance discriminatory policies based on the data that we have. And those are I don't think those are that hard to understand, and those are responsibilities that we have. We do need, I think, ethicists and people with different backgrounds to help businesses and policymakers decide these issues, but I'm not sure it's that different in the new age of technology, and it's about people, again, and us as leaders taking accountability for these things.
It's interesting, going back to what you just said about transparency and black box and all of that. I believe here in the European Union, there's actually some legislation that says that, if you're going to apply artificial intelligence, you have to be able to show justify how the AI actually came to its decision. So I think this is something that is going to have to be done because businesses will be held accountable. But the other point I wanted to make, going back to this whole thing, the example you used about black box and AI being used to make decisions on, in criminal cases, who's to say that human beings are better? Because I remember reading about a case where it was proven that judges tended to give harsher sentences right before lunch when they were hungry and in a bad mood, right? So maybe you're better off having an unbiased AI decide on what your sentence is rather than a human being. Because I think sometimes we get lost in this whole idea that like we as humans are somehow superior to the technology, and that's it's not just a question of like, can the AI do the job better, but can the AI maybe be more, could be fairer in some cases? Don't know. Anybody want to take that?
In the end of the day, I am a human person sitting here, so I wouldn't say one over the other in my context of what I do. I do think it's very important to combine the both and stay true to. In this debate, I think it's very important also to talk about yourself as a leader and accountability and responsibility and know what is your purpose. I think when you know that, you can answer those questions easier.
To that, Tim?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing, and it comes back to the point that was coming up earlier, that you can choose to make the choice between the human or the technology, or you can choose to try and understand how the technology can best help the human. In the case of your sentencing guideline example, might it be more useful for the AI to tell the judge what it would have done in their place, not to make the decision, but I would have done this, you did that, and over time we start to understand what the differences are, and then we can have a discussion about them. That's off. I think that might actually result in a more powerful outcome, because you potentially change the behavior of the human to be more effective because of the role that the AI has played in showing up the differences or illustrating a behavior that may not have been optimal. There's been a lot of work done by car companies over the last few years as they've built more and more sensors into cars, not only to figure out how to build autonomous vehicles, but actually just to inform drivers what they're doing when they're driving. And it is remarkable what we do when we're driving, and remarkable how erratic we are. And Elon Musk is famous for claiming that AI will be cut out 90% of accidents. Well, if you look at the data, he may well be right, because we are pretty lousy drivers, to be honest with you.
So let's go back to this idea of how AI can augment human skills and help us get better. There are lots of cases, for example, in medicine, where AI is now working hand in hand with doctors or radiologists to make their jobs easier, to find the anomalies so that the medical personnel can focus just on the serious cases and don't have to spend time calling through lots of material. What are some other examples?
Yeah, I think when you look at some of these things, you have to look at the part of the world you're talking about too. In a lot of the world, the issue is they don't have enough access to experts and specialists in the right healthcare, and the technology has tremendous, we're talking about, has tremendous benefits to be able to get more leverage if you're in a country that has one radiologist per 10 million people in the population. Getting better leverage out of that one person through leveraging technology is critically important. When we're looking at what some companies have done using that example, again in radiology, it's interesting what a company like Philips has done, for example, with the new platform that they've developed, where they're using artificial intelligence to provide recommendations, as Tim was saying, in terms of how to diagnose images, but also it's adapting the whole way that the technology works to suit the need of the radiologist. Radiologists tend to tend to view things differently and look at images in a different order and compare different things. Well, what the technology is doing is learning an individual radiologist's behavior and how they diagnose and changing the way it displays images and what kind of information it presents to help each individual radiologist in a personalized way make more effective recommendations. And that's where we see tremendous potential, again, for the technology to come together and make people more effective and get better results.
I mean, the thing that I'm most excited about in healthcare is that the hierarchy of healthcare as we understand it today will start to change, right? So the hierarchy of healthcare today is that the people at the very top, the surgeons, the specialists, are at the top because of very specific technical knowledge that they have, not necessarily because they're better at delivering human care or healthcare. Some do, some don't. But the opportunity for some of this technology to be in the hands of people, I suspect often more diverse populations, much often perhaps maybe biased toward women, never mind biased towards men, who are better at delivering the difficult pieces of healthcare, empathy, care, consistency, availability, all of these sorts of things, that putting the AI in their hands will ultimately deliver a better healthcare outcome than the technically driven healthcare hierarchy that we have today. Now, and to Paul's point, be able to deliver that in parts of the world where we don't even have the sophisticated healthcare infrastructure that we might have here in Europe or that we might have in America.
Yeah, I was also thinking, you said something earlier, what's the purpose of business? And I think, going back to what I said as well, I think you need to, today as a leader or as an influencer, you need to know your purpose. And the purpose of business for me is making people's lives better, to be a little bit more happier and have a good time together in the end of the day somehow. It can sound sometimes maybe a bit naive, but I really believe that's the purpose of why we're here and what we're going to do, whether it's with machines, technology or not. And that's why I think it's extremely relevant. Who do you put on the top and what's the purpose of that person? You mentioned one example now with the healthcare. If you don't put someone there with a lot of power and influence who really cares about those things, I'm not so sure the machine or the technology would be so much more helpful either.
I think that's a great point, because maybe one of the things that machines can't do better than we can is express empathy, right? So, maybe EQ becomes, something that is more important going forward. In Japan, they talk about using robots for elder care, but I think most people would prefer to have, a loving human being take care of them.
The crisis they have in Japan and China is the sheer number of elderly people is such that providing any care to the elderly is going to be a challenge. So they've been investing in robots in Japan for a long time because they could see this coming. The wonderful thing about demographics is you can see them 30, 40 years ahead, and so they've been investing in it a long time. We've had less need to do that in Europe and America because the shift in populations towards aging is a little slower, although it's speeding up. But again, I suspect that the optimal solutions will be the right blend of the two. It won't be robots only looking after us as older people, but it might be robots who are able to kind of keep an eye on things 24 hours a day, so that if something does go wrong, human beings can respond more quickly, rather than the tragedy that we see so often with elderly people on their own. They'll have a fall, or they might have a heart attack or something, and nobody will find them for 48 hours, which, of course, is way too late. And so perhaps technology will be able to avoid that tragedy and allow human beings to be there when needed, even if we only have less than we would like available to work in some of those areas.
Okay, so I lived 4 years in Japan, and what you talk about with robotics, there was this survey, and they asked a lot of people, who would you like to take care of you when you get old? And you could choose between women, foreigners, or robots. And it was not the women, it was not the foreigners, it was the robots in that kind of
Did they ever figure out why?
No, but I think the interesting thing, because I've been there for 4 years, and the more you know, the less you know, kind of thing. But I think in that it's interesting what we say. We need to understand culture and the background of culture when we debate with machine and the purpose, so to say. And the culture, what I learned being a Scandinavian woman leading in Japan, is very different. So I think the cultural aspect cannot be expressed in the diversity of things, not just men and women, also in these questions. That's more of my point.
But I think there's tremendous potential too with looking at what the robots and the technology and artificial intelligence are going to be good at. There's been great research done at many institutions on social robotics and emotional AI and things like this around the benefits to autistic children and Alzheimer's patients and the like, around how the technology can enhance quality of life and create engaging experiences to supplement what people are doing. But it's using the technology to engage with the person in a way that really enhances their quality of life. So I think there's tremendous opportunities for that. But then if you look at the opportunity we have, probably the greatest underserved need we have for humanity right now is healthcare, and dealing with the healthcare access in countries that are underserved, the aging demographics in countries, in the more developed countries and such. And so we need to embrace these different technologies and then look at how we augment them and create opportunities for people to move in. I kind of look at where we are with technology now, like when Tesla and Edison were inventing electricity distribution about 140 years ago. Nobody knew we were going to have microwaves and refrigerators and all the things that were going to consume the electricity, and that transformed the world. It's kind of where we are now, and if you look at the underserved needs that humanity has, I think that's where the answer to where a lot of the jobs are going to be created, and there's no shortage of these underserved needs out there.
And one of the implications that I don't think people have really gotten their heads around yet with AI is that, unlike with the Industrial Revolution, or the previous 3 industrial revolutions, if you want to take the World Economic Forum definitions, where everything was designed, kind of set in stone, built, coded, manufactured, and shipped into the world, and then once it was in the world, it was sort of fixed, right? I mean, you can't change the design of your car once you've bought it. You can't change the design of your phone once you get it. But with AI, that's not true, right? With all of these data-driven intelligence technologies, they can and will and do continue to evolve once they kind of get out into the world. They're much more kind of like biology than they are like our old mechanistic machine view of the world. So what that means is that all of us in society are going to have to be able to be more thoughtful, creative, and engaged with how we want these technologies to be to evolve. I mean, you can take the simple example. Imagine you have your own agent or agents that you're interacting with that might be helping you, whatever. It might be in your car, it could be whatever. Well, just like when you get a pet, a dog, how you train it very much affects the life you have with that animal, right? So the same is going to be true of AI. How it's trained, how you live with it, what you choose to do with it is going to affect the life that you have with that AI. So, smart people, when they acquire animals, think about the training of the animal, right? And I think the same is going to have to be true of these technologies. And so that's an enormous shift in the role we have in shaping the technology that's in our lives. That's not been possible before. It was never possible with the old Industrial Revolution technologies. And so we all are going to have a responsibility to shape these things and engage with these things and understand them a little bit.
I think that's a great note for us to end on. So I'd like to ask for a nice round of applause for our panel. Thank you very much.